We're talking today with Sally Robson of East Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Sally, begin with a little bit of background on yourself. To start with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Muskegon, Michigan at Hackley Hospital. I
In what year?
graduated.
In
I
what?
was born in 1937,
Okay.
January, and I graduated from high school there, went to Albion College, got my teaching degree.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you're going very fast,
Oh, okay.
so we're going to roll things back a little bit.
All right.
Okay. So what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
My father owned a steel company in Muskegon, and we had I had wonderful parents, and we went to the Methodist church there, and then we had a home on Lake Michigan that I spent 6 months out of the year in, and then lived in town 6 months out of the year.
Okay. Now, you're a little kid during World War II, and I take it having a steel business during World War II was a good thing?
Yes, it was very good, actually. Yes, it was.
Okay. And you're really too young to remember sort of depression per se. Or
No, I
whatever.
don't remember that.
Do you have any kind of memories of the war years?
My biggest memory is that was my mother and sister and I sitting at the radio and listening to news of World War. I was just little, and my mother with tears coming down her cheeks, and I remember feeling bad that my mother felt bad because I didn't really understand what was going on. I had cousins on Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal, and one that flew over Africa, and my father had cousins in the war. So it was a very sad time and scary, very scary.
Yeah. Now, were you doing well enough that you weren't really affected by rationing or things like that? Or?
I do remember buying war bonds, going to school and buying war bonds. And I don't remember rationing, really. It maybe happened, but I don't remember it.
Okay. All right. So now, so basically now so you go through the school system in Muskegon. So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1955.
Okay. And then you went to Albion after
Yes,
that.
yes.
All right. And then trained to be a teacher.
Right.
Okay.
Why Albion?
Well, I didn't really want to go to college at all because I wanted to stay home, because I'm such a home person. And but my sister intervened and said to my parents, "You better make Sally go away to college because otherwise she'll be here the rest of her life."
This was your older sister?
My older sister,
What was her name?
Nancy, and she died a few years ago. She lived in Petoskey, and we were very close. But anyway, so I chose Albion just because it was a Methodist school. I'd heard about it through my church, and that's really why I chose it.
And was Nancy in college herself?
Yes, she went to Hope College for a year and then graduated from Michigan.
Okay. All right. Now, good. We are interviewing you in part because you wound up being married to a doctor who served in the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And we'll get recording stories people went through. So at what point in your life do you meet your husband?
I met him really my freshman year at Albion.
Okay.
And we started dating our sophomore year and got pinned, and that was it.
Can you explain what got pinned meant? Because a lot of people today
Oh,
will not
that's
know
right.
what that means.
That you wore a pin, your husband's fraternity pin. He was a Delta Tau Delta, and I was a Delta Gamma, and I was in a sorority. And so you got pinned, which meant that you were engaged to be engaged, kind of thing.
Okay. Now, did you get married after you finished school or while you were still in school?
No, we got married after his freshman year in medical school.
Okay. All right. Now, were you in the same class at Albion?
Yes, we were in
Okay.
the same class.
All right. So, so he starts medical school, and where does he go to medical school?
Michigan,
Okay.
University of Michigan.
All right. And so, what did you do then, right after you graduated?
I taught school in Walled Lake, which is a town near Ann Arbor. Taught and lived with 2 other gals there, and it was fun and wonderful.
Okay.
And
So wait, this was before you got married?
yes, a year before we got married.
Okay.
We didn't get married because Larry wanted to make sure that he was secure could get through his freshman year of medical school, which I always knew he could, but he was worried about that. So
What did you teach?
I taught second grade.
Oh, how fun.
I loved it. I
How
just
yeah.
loved it.
How big was the school?
Larry, my school?
Yeah, the one you were teaching in.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. It had 2 second grades, I know, and
Okay.
lots of. And it was a great time, really. I had a lot of fun.
All right. And so, did you just teach for the 1 year, or did you stay on?
No, then when we got married, I taught in Ypsilanti at an Erikson school, and there I met some wonderful friends. So that I taught then until through Larry's first year of internship, which was here at Blodgett Hospital.
Okay. So, how long did it take him to get through medical school?
Well, it was 4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
And then you have an internship and then a residency?
He had a year of internship, 4 years of general surgery residency. Then he went in the service for 2 years, and then took a year of residency in vascular surgery at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit.
Were you teaching all the time that
No,
he was doing that?
no, I didn't teach after I had my son.
Oh, okay.
And when was he born?
He was born in 1964.
Okay. All right. Now, in the period there where you're married and he's going through his medical training and then the internship and the residency and so forth, did he know he was going to have to go in the service at some point?
Yes, he had signed on. He went to Detroit. He had to sign on for it's called the Berry Plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that guaranteed that he, wouldn't be drafted right away, that he could finish his residency in general surgery. But he knew then that he had to go into the Navy for 2 years.
Okay. And so what year did he actually go in?
Let's see, that would have been, 1968, I believe, yes.
So your son was 4 years old.
Yes, he was 4, and
But-
my daughter was a year old.
And their names are?
Bill and Becky.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So as he's going through his residency, the Vietnam War is heating up substantially.
Yes,
All right. Now, had he chosen his branch of service already? Did you
Yes.
know? Okay.
he chose the Navy.
Why the Navy?
He said he liked the uniforms.
And how did you feel about the uniforms?
Oh, well, they were fine. Of course, I wish he hadn't gone at all.
Okay. Now, basically, so you were already basically living in the Grand Rapids area at the point
Yes.
when he actually has to go off into the service?
No. He went into the service after his residency,
Mm-hmm.
and we were sent to Corpus Christi, Texas,
Okay.
for his first year of naval duty, and we lived there for 7 months with our children, and then he was called to go to Vietnam.
Okay. Let's go down to Corpus Christi now. You've got 2 kids. You're going down there. What kind of setup did you have? Did you live on base, off base?
No, they didn't have officer housing at the time, so we bought a house, which was nice at the time, but there were problems afterwards. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, you weren't going to be staying there very long.
Well, just 2 years.
Yeah.
We hoped,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't. When we moved there, they said, "Oh, you won't be sent to Vietnam. Nobody from here has ever gone to Vietnam."
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he got his orders, and I cried a lot, and
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah. Now, during those years before you went down there and you knew he was going in, were you paying much attention to the news and following what was happening?
Oh yes, we certainly were. It was a very scary time.
Okay. Did you yourself have any particular attitude of the war during that period?
I really felt, because my parents, we all talked about it a lot, and at the time we felt that our country was doing the right thing. At the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to look back and say, well, we didn't, but at the time,
Right.
we felt it was the right thing to do.
Okay. So really the prospect of Larry going in, it's just like, okay, it's what he signed up for, it's his duty,
Right,
we'll just do that.
right.
Okay. But in the meantime, when you went down to Corpus Christi, then they're starting to say, "Oh, don't worry, you don't have to go to Vietnam."
Right.
But Vietnam had gotten pretty ugly by then, and we needed more
Terrible.
doctors. Okay, so what was daily life like in Corpus Christi while you were there?
Well, I had my children. Larry worked on the base. I would take my children either to the office. It was really hot. We moved there in July.
Oh,
It was really hot. So I took my children to either Padre Island, you know, the Gulf of Mexico, and we would picnic there and whatever. Or I would take them to the Officers Club. They had a pool there, and we would swim there. And we didn't go out for dinner very much at all. My parents came to visit. Larry's parents came to visit. And I cried when they left. I mean, I felt like I was at the end of the world. You know, you're at the tip of Texas, you know. It's, you know, I did not like my time in Texas at all. Larry did because he got to go hunting. And, you know, that was okay.
so you're in your own house.
Yes.
Are there other military wives around you? Or?
There were a few streets over, and we did get together with people, and I was in an officer's wives club thing, which was very nice, and that's how I got to meet people. And that part was very nice.
Okay. Now, when you got there, did you get to meet some of them right away?
Yes, I did. And that was so helpful, because we didn't know a soul, you know.
Yeah.
And then what kinds of advice or information did they give you?
I don't know. Of course, for me, you know, I had my kids, and that was wonderful. And Larry, as I say, he enjoyed his time there. And there we met a lot of doctors and their wives. And next door to us there was a lawyer and his wife he was drafted into the service. He wasn't happy about that. And they were nice. But there was no one on my block that I could talk to.
But now your kids are how old now?
Bill was 4 and Becky 1.
Right. So
They were little.
that's really hard
Yeah, it
to
was
move that
hard.
far away from your folks. And
Oh, it was awful.
yeah.
And there's no school community to become part of because they're
No,
too young
because
at
she
that
was too
point.
young.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Did you have a church down there that you
Yes, we
went to?
did. We went to a Methodist church.
All right. And
So that was nice.
Now, did they provide much for you, or
Not really.
Okay.
No.
you just went there on Sundays? What kind of schedule was Larry working?
He worked every day, was on call every other weekend, on call at night. The first week we got there, he had to stay on the base. And that was scary to me because I was all alone with my kids and I didn't like that at all. But that's what you did, you know.
All right. Was the culture, the way of life down there different from what you were used to?
Oh, it's very different there. You know, people are different, I think, in Texas. You know, I think, it's a generalization, but I think they're a little phony. The people that lived on my block, and, but you know, there were friendly people too. I don't know.
Yeah. But it really did not feel like home at that point.
No, not a bit. No,
All right.
not a bit.
Now, so when Larry gets the call to go to Vietnam, now what do you do?
Well, I cried a lot, and then, and then I was embarrassed to think that I had cried when we moved to Texas because I didn't like it there. So then I felt terrible because it was so much worse what was happening. But then I flew back here with my kids. I went to my parents' house in Muskegon, and they wanted me. I stayed with them. I lived with them, with Bill and Becky and a dog, for almost that year that he was gone.
What'd you do with the house?
Oh, we
in Texas?
well, we rented it.
Ah, okay.
And then a year later, the people were going to buy it, and a flood happened.
Oh dear.
Or no, I mean a hurricane happened, and it leveled the house.
Oh my gosh.
So we lost a lot there.
Oh.
Yeah, that was kind of awful.
Yeah. No
So-
flood insurance coverage or anything like that for that kind of thing.
No,
That's too bad.
nothing. So, Yeah, that part wasn't so good. But it happened.
Okay. So Larry heads out. Now, what kind of contact or communication did you have with him once he was gone?
I only talked to him twice that year, and he called me once from a ship, and he called me once, he had gone to Japan
Mm-hmm.
to take an injured person there, and so he called me then. But we did make tapes,
Mm-hmm.
and I sent them every week, and we wrote to each other every day. And so that was mainly our communication.
Did you know he was going to call? Or did the phone ring and you picked it up and it
I
was him?
didn't know, yes, the phone just rang and it was him.
That must have been amazing.
Oh, it was. And then when you talked on the phone from Vietnam and the operator was there, she would break in if you were saying so. Like I said to Larry, he was on a ship, and I said, oh, I hear a typhoon is coming. And the operator broke right in and said, you're not allowed to talk about that. And then you talked and you had to say over.
Mhm.
You said something and then you said over. It was very odd.
Huh.
Yeah, it was a radio communication
Yes.
set up, kind of like you're using ham radio type. So it's like
Yes.
you talk, and then they have to switch over so the
Yeah.
other side can hear. Yeah,
It was weird.
yeah, not ideal in a lot of ways.
No.
Okay. When you wrote to him, what kinds of things did you tell him?
I just told him about everything we were doing and, you know, who I saw. And the neat thing is that Larry wrote Bill and Becky letters.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple Christmases ago, in their stockings, I put those letters.
Oh.
And they loved that. I mean,
Mhm.
that was very touching, and they got very emotional about it.
Mhm.
But that was nice that I had those letters to give to them.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Now, when he's talking to you or writing to you, because he's talking to you, I guess those 2 times on the phone, there's somebody listening.
right.
But when he wrote, what kinds of things would he
He
say?
told me what was happening, and he, of course, did not like what was happening over there at all. Or they were pretty awful. In fact, you know, they were upsetting, to say the least. And my sister would say he shouldn't write about those things to you because they're so awful.
Mm-hmm.
But I was glad he could, to express himself, you know. Those were very hard times. They were hard times. And so at least I had the nicest mailman who would come and say, oh, here's a letter for you, you know. It was really nice. And it was wonderful that my parents had me live with them and my children and our dog. They couldn't have been more wonderful.
Was it hard? I mean, could you talk to anybody about the contents of the letters?
Well, my parents and my sister, and I had aunts that lived across the street, and they were wonderful too. I had some marvelous support group with my parents and my aunts and my sister and her husband, and Larry's parents too. I would go to their house every so often with the kids, and they were wonderful.
Did
to
they
me.
live in Muskegon too?
No, they lived in Allegan. That's where
Oh,
Larry
okay.
was born. And they lived in Allegan, so I would go there, and so it was, you know, that part was wonderful.
Okay. Now, this period, a lot's going on in '68 into '69 at home as well as in Vietnam. How aware were you of the whole anti-war movement going on?
Oh, I was very aware. I would go like to the bank or to the store, and they'd say, oh, your husband's in Vietnam? Well, he's going to be a changed person when he comes back. You won't even recognize him. He'll just be awful. And that was scary to me, of course. But, you know, because of our letters and our tapes, he sounded fine,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the kind of stereotypes that was already starting to pop up by that time, and you know, based on not always a whole lot of evidence, or what happens to some people but not others.
Right.
I mean, Larry was serving primarily on a hospital ship, right?
No, he was just on the ship for 2 weeks.
Oh, that was just
He was
a voyage.
he was right in Quang Tri,
Okay.
on the base there.
Okay. So we do have an interview with him on file. I should have looked at that before. But for
That's
anyone
okay.
interested in this, yeah, you can watch her interview and his. Yeah. So he's there, and that's very far north part of South Vietnam, and there was a
Right.
lot of fighting going
A
on
lot
there.
of fighting.
And so he's seeing a lot of things go through there.
Terrible
Right.
things.
Okay. Now, did you ever get any kind of trouble or negativity from people in this? Because on the one hand, they're saying, "Oh, bad things can happen to him," but were they also negative just that he was there at all?
No, I didn't get that.
Okay.
And I did not get it then.
Now, after he came back, did you encounter any of that?
Well, yeah, Larry did. When we moved back here, that was a couple of years later, a friend of ours asked Larry to speak to a youth group at downtown, at the Methodist Church downtown. And he did, and people were very angry that they'd asked him. People of the church were angry that they'd asked him to speak. They did not like that at all. That probably was the only time that, as I say, I'd run into people at the store or wherever before, when he was in Vietnam,
Yeah.
and they would tell me awful things about their relatives or whatever, and that was scary to me. But that was what I ran into, but then Larry ran into this other thing at the church.
Was he speaking about Vietnam?
Yes, he was. And they, of course, were very much against the war, and they just didn't think he should have been asked to talk there.
Mm-hmm.
You were also part of the time in which the women's movement had really taken hold, that came out of the anti-war movement.
Mm-hmm.
Did that have any impact on you that you can think
No,
of?
I don't remember that at all. I really don't.
And do you remember sort of news about women's liberation and all of that kind of stuff, or was that just out there somewhere?
Yes, it just didn't affect me.
I guess you'd already been a professional yourself by this time, and you were college educated, and you were doing what you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, might not have registered in quite the same way as
Right.
with some of them.
No, it didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
What about
okay.
the civil rights movement? Now that's the same era too.
That was when we were in college.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Okay.
Well-
when we were in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
And, I remember watching it on TV and thinking how awful and whatever, and thinking we should go and do something, but we didn't. Thought about it, but, so that really didn't, it affected me in a certain way, but I never went through with anything.
Okay. Now, when Larry's tour in Vietnam ends, and that would get you into '69, did he still have time left in the service?
He did. He had 4 months left in the service, so he was sent to the Naval Base in North Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and we lived there for four months. And our son was in kindergarten, so he left Muskegon and went to a grade school in North Chicago. And
Is that the Great Lakes training station?
Naval,
Yeah,
and I don't think it's there anymore. I don't know.
Well, there's something there, but a lot of it has closed down. The Navy does a lot of its training now in San Diego. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was at that time, it was a very big base, and there was a lot of training going on.
Oh,
and-
yes.
And it had its hospital
Yes.
and all the rest of that.
We would go and see the men. It was in the spring, and they would sometimes take them outside, and I did take my children to a sailor graduation,
Mm-hmm.
hoping they'd remember it, but they didn't. But of course. Also gave them their first train ride, which they don't remember either. But
Did you socialize there on
yes,
base?
yes. Then
So you were living in on the base itself?
on the base there, yes.
That must have been a little bit easier than Texas.
It was much easier, and yes, I met a lot more, and I joined the Doctors' Wives group there as well, and that was nice. We had friends from here that came to visit us while we were there, and our parents came, and so that was nice, and I was, of course, very thrilled that Larry was out of that horribleness, you
Mhm.
know.
Okay. What kind of effect did the experience seem to have on him? I mean, they're warning you, oh, he's going to be all different and so forth.
He, it didn't seem like it bothered him. I mean, of course, things troubled him terribly, but he didn't show it. When he got off the plane, I remember I gave him the keys to the car and his hand was shaking so he couldn't put the key in the keyhole. But other than that, for a long time, he talked about it a little bit to me, but he didn't really want to talk about it, which I think a lot of men don't want to. And but then when we moved from North Chicago to Detroit, so that Larry took his vascular surgery residency there, and then the 4th of July came, and we went to a fireworks display, and that started nightmares. That was awful because when he was in Vietnam, they would send rockets up every 30 seconds or something, and that's when his nightmares started.
How long did they last?
Well, through the night, and then, that was kind of it, but, he doesn't like to do fireworks because of that.
Yeah. But I mean, was there sort of just was there a period in his life there where he would have nightmares regularly, or
No.
was it just kind of
No.
triggered by that particular thing for that
Right,
particular
right.
night?
And he hasn't had many of those, just on the 4th of July.
You were sort of in a situation where you've been kind of the boss of the family while he's gone, because even although you're living with your parents when you're in North Chicago to some extent, but was it difficult at all for you to?
No, I was thrilled to death. The minute he came home, I forgot everything I knew. I mean, really, it was, no, it wasn't difficult at all.
Happy to turn the responsibility back to him.
Yeah, that was wonderful. No, probably shouldn't say that, but it's true.
If it's true, it needs to be said.
Oh.
And then, let's see, so you had it was basically a year in Detroit for that residency?
Yes, a year.
Okay. And then did he have a job lined up after that?
Yes, then we came back here, and he worked at Blodgett Hospital and St. Mary's. He divided his practice into 2 places.
Okay. Now, when you're back here and you're kind of settling and meeting people, and there's a whole generation of doctors who did military service in that era. A lot of them had various versions of the Berry plan. And then, and I guess the circle that you associated with or whatever, were there other doctors who had done the same thing that Larry did?
Just one other, and he was a general surgeon, and they were friends of ours before, and they went to Germany. And so he had to stay in for 3 years. If you chose a place that was not under attack, you had to stay in for 3 years. So, but this other fellow was the only one that had to go. We knew older doctors who had been in World War II, and their plight was much worse than ours because they would go for 2 to 3 years without ever hearing from anybody, and their wives didn't hear from them.
They could still write.
They wrote, yes.
Not have been very good at it.
No.
But yeah, because they were going in for the duration, and in Vietnam things were on a calendar. So
yes,
you
they
did it
were.
that way. Okay. So kind of ask that question in part, because you really didn't have anybody else to kind of compare your stories with
No,
or
I
experiences with.
No,
It was just sort of something that happened,
right.
and you went on. Do you think that the experience changed his perspective at all, either about the war itself or politics, or just how he went about things?
I don't think so, really. I mean, he just knew that he had a job to do, and, he's not a politician by any means. He just, he took an oath to help people, and so that's what he did. I mean, that kind of was as simple as that.
What about you? Did his experience and your experience together change your opinions about the war or politics or the world at large?
No, truthfully, at the time, we believed it was the right thing to do. Looking back now, obviously it was not. It was, I worried about him terribly, I was told that if anything happened to him, I would hear from the Red Cross, before that was in the paper. But in the paper, every other day it would say Quang Tri rocketed, and that's where Larry was. And that just scared me to death. And I must say, when Larry had been gone to Vietnam, about 4 weeks later, my mother was very proper, and we always ate at the table, and she had breakfast, and we all went to breakfast, and I started just walking. I think I had a sort of mini breakdown. And so my mother put me to bed, and my children were around me, patting me, and my mother called the doctor, and he came, and I don't remember what he did now or anything, but I just stayed in bed like for that day. I just kind of couldn't come to terms with it all, because it was very frightening, to have your husband in a war.
Mm-hmm.
And so
and Bill was only 4. when he went.
and then 5 when we.
Did he ask
lived.
her, "Where's Daddy"?
Oh yes, and then what interesting about that is that when we would send tapes, the first tape we sent, Bill loved to talk in the microphone, and so he did say, "Daddy, have you been shot yet?"
Oh, jeepers.
I know, I've got a tape. "Daddy, have you been shot yet? I hope you're not shot." And that, I didn't realize he was thinking about that. That was helpful to me to talk to him about, you could see the news every night on TV and see what was happening. And so we talked about that, about how safe or whatever his father. And see, I thought my husband had a gun with him. He didn't. He turned it in. He didn't want to be responsible for the gun. But I thought he did. That made me feel better to think he was safer with a gun.
You're talking about television news. So were you regularly watching the TV news through that whole period?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So you didn't just tune out of after a while and decide not to?
No.
And then your son would also see that going by anyway, and it was
Yeah.
there. Because I'm a little older than he was, but I mean that was something that had a very profound effect on me to the point where I didn't want to watch the evening news.
I can understand that.
I was like 8 or 9, but it was sort of
I don't know if we watched it all the time,
Mhm.
but I certainly remember sometimes that we did.
yeah.
And I'm sure it was scary, but Bill thought it was kind of, he's a little boy, and he thought it was kind of exciting. I didn't, but I wanted to know what was going on, too, And Becky was too young to realize.
Yeah.
She didn't really even know her dad when she was just 2, barely 2, when he came home.
How'd she react?
Well, there's a, when he was in Vietnam, we took my kids to the airport when he was flying away, and so she'd say, she could barely talk, and she'd say, "Daddy in Kai," in the sky, and so when he came back, she was fine, but a little bit standoffish, because she didn't know who this man was. And of course, Bill was thrilled to death to have him back. We have darling pictures of when he came back, They're really cute.
Okay.
This one here?
Yeah.
It's different when soldiers come back today than it was when
Oh, yes.
Larry came home.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
And how we're treating
And
veterans
how we
now.
treat veterans
Oh, but
now
I
compared to...
I think how wonderful. They get to Skype, they get to talk every day if they want to. I think it's a wonderful thing, and how lucky for them that they have all these new devices, to help them.
And you also have the community itself is a lot more positive toward them.
Oh, yes, so much more, yes.
Yeah. I mean, would it sort of, when you just dealt with people generally in the community, Larry's back and he's a doctor and this kind of thing, does it sort of not come up that he was in the service or in Vietnam?
No, not very often, not really. I'd heard about people spitting on doctors and, doing terrible things. That did not happen where we were. So that was a good thing.
Yeah. And the communities where you were living, whether it was Muskegon while he was gone, or Grand Rapids afterward, or in Texas, or Chicago, whatever, did you have a sense that people were generally supportive of people in the service?
Well, I did because, in Texas we were with military people, and in Chicago we were with military people, and I actually love that part because And in Texas, I love the aspect of people in the service who were so dedicated. I found that very impressive, that all these people were so dedicated to working in the service and, and were behind anybody who was in the service. I really like that aspect of meeting people like that.
Okay. And then if you're in Muskegon or in Grand Rapids, is it more just indifference or?
I think it was. People, I don't think, of course, Larry didn't want to talk about it. So people were very nice. I didn't find it any different, really.
Yeah. And these were not, areas with big colleges in them or places that would be hotbeds of
No.
unrest or whatever.
No, not a bit.
Yeah. So you don't have that part of that in the community in that way. So, yeah. So, I guess if you look back on the whole experience now of having your husband go off to war essentially and come back, how do you view that, or how do you think that affected you?
Well, I just wish, and Larry would say this too, that there should never be another war. It's horrifying. It's horrible. It's. I mean, I still can't imagine what Larry went through. I mean, I can to a certain extent, but it was so awful. I mean, they would have these body bags, they would dump these, and then he also treated the North Koreans,
Or Vietnamese?
or the Vietnamese,
Yeah.
but also and they would of course want to kill you as much as look at you, I guess. That was a very awful experience. People will say, "Oh, didn't you learn a lot?" And Larry said, "Yes, I learned you don't go to war." And I think that's true. It only affects me in that I had someone that I loved be in a war that was horrific. But I'm very proud that he did it. He did what he was supposed to do, and he did it. And I'm proud of him for that. I really am.
All right. And do you think that you kind of grew or changed at all because you had to go through it on this end?
Well, I guess I hope I did. I don't know, but I think I did a bit. I feel like I'm still the same person in most ways. So.
But you did have to take care of 2 kids by yourself.
I did, yeah.
But with support from family, but still,
but
it's different.
But it was, but I just loved it. I
Yeah.
loved being with my kids. That is not a hardship to me, ever. No.
And they still talk to you?
Yes, they do. That's the best part.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time
Thank
to talk to us
you.
today.
That was lovely.
Okay.